We welcome one and all to the Snore TV in conversation with Professor David.R.Syiemlieh. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, to begin, let us talk about your brief history of your life.
Well, at 72, to make it brief is asking a lot, but I'm used to speaking in this way, giving just the gist of my life. Well, I was born in Assam, Mutrapur tea estate, where my father was a tea planter, and lived for the first 4 years in Assam as I grew up there. Then I moved up to Kalimpong at the age of 5, Kalimpong in West Bengal, into a mission school, Dr. Graham's Homes, which was the best part of my life. I was there a good 13 years and I completed my Indian school certificate from Kalimpong. Returning to Shillong was quite an adjustment because I had been away all those years, and to adjust to city life and to life in Shillong, in Lumparing, was quite a challenge. We would have to carry water, long distances. We did not have electricity in our home, but these did not deter me from furthering my studies, and I got admission in St. Edmunds in 1971. You'll have to pardon me speaking with all these dates, but I'm a historian and dates come in easily to me. Completing my education in 1974 and then getting admission into Nehu in 1976. 1974 to 1976, yes. So all my studies, my postgraduate and undergraduate studies were done in Shillong, and I was very fortunate enough to have had the finest of institutions where I was able to be nurtured. I always wanted to be a teacher, and therefore I looked for opportunities, and I first taught in a private school in Nongthamai. Soon after that there was an opening in St. Edmunds and I became a lecturer in St. Edmunds, and I remained there for 2 years before another advertisement came out for appointments of assistant lecturers in Nehu History Department, and I joined there in 1979.
So, sir, can you tell me, or tell us, the viewers, who was or how was David.R.Syiemlieh as a young lad?
As normal as everybody else, mischievous, good at a time, quiet, contemplative. I loved reading books and comics. My mum remembers giving me a supply of Beano, the comic in those days. I enjoyed reading, I enjoyed potting around the house. I was like anybody else, very normal, very good. But Mummy, you said I was very quiet. I was on the quiet side of life.
So how was your profession as a teacher began?
Well, as I said, it began in a private school in St. John's in Nongthamai, where I was but for 3 months, and then I moved on to St. Edmunds. But I always wanted to be a teacher. I never wanted to be anything else. And it gives me great happiness having been a teacher all my life thereafter. Putting in 33 years of teaching in Nehu, 2 years in St. Edmunds, and I would have completed a historic 45 years of teaching had I not gone to the UPSC.
Wonderful journey. Sir, I would like to know, like all of us, when we were in middle school, our teachers on the first day of school would ask, introduce yourself, tell us where you stay, and tell us your aim in life, and tell us your hobbies. So what is your aim in life then, and what are your hobbies?
Well, as a young adolescent and even as a young teenager, I had no aim in life other than to be a good student. And I guess I applied myself to my studies so carefully that it then motivated me to be a teacher. I remember my school friends would call me professor, and I'm happy I was able to meet that challenge of becoming a professor in time.
And what are your hobbies, sir?
Well, I used to do a lot of reading of novels, but that's gone out, and I've given all my books away. And but I used to read a lot of old editions of the Reader's Digest. The Reader's Digest, unfortunately, went out of circulation, and these days it has come back in a much slimmer version. But the material there was marvelous, a digest of news, information, stories, health issues, and humor articles. But I love reading biographies. I would love reading history texts. I used to potter around the garden, as I said in another interview, growing vegetables. My beetroots were lovely. I mean, you could just come and see the beetroots and the leaves and the size of the beet. And beans, I would grow beans. I love growing lettuce, and you could see my garden now. It's brimming with lettuce, which we grow for my son's restaurant in Lytham Crab.
Wonderful. So what is any quote that you remember from reading in Reader's Digest, like you said, was one of your favorite? Any quote that you remember?
Are you catching me off the cuff? I can't remember anything. I can't think. Do forgive me for that.
Thank you, sir. Anyway, sir, I would like you to tell me about your most challenging and rewarding moments.
My most challenging moments were when I was able to get admission in St. Edmunds with very little funding. Life was a struggle, and to have got admission in a prestigious college like St. Edmunds was a marvelous achievement for me. But more than my achievement, it was the kindness of Brother Vieira. I must attribute my admission to Brother Vieira and the kindness that he showed me. And I rewarded the college in a sense by getting the first position in history in 1974. Now that helped me into another achievement to get admission in NEHU, and I followed that up again in 1976 by getting the first position in history, the first batch of students of history in the Department of History in NEHU.
Sir, Professor, how did you prepare for the exams?
Well, more than prepare for the exams, it was rigorous attendance of classes, take my notes, carrying my notes in a jhola, going to college regularly, not missing out, being a good boy. And I would pester the librarian for the books. He would give me more books than I was allowed to have. And I would rampage through the library of St. Edmunds and NEHU. And I showed my interest in books. Mummy would remember me at home, giving me cups of tea, endless cups of tea, while I would be preparing for the examinations. In those days, we did annual examinations, and we would have 2 to 3 weeks preparatory time for the examinations. So I would sit on my bed with some 15-20 books. I had my notes. I would already have made my notes and prepared my answers to the extent possible. But for a wider knowledge, I would read chapter by chapter from book to book. And even in those days, I had a library of the essential books, and not the help books in the history subject, but the actual texts that were prescribed by the university.
So, sir, what was your favorite subject?
Geography initially, but because I couldn't pursue geography as an honors subject in St. Edmunds, I then moved on to history. But I believe history and geography work in tandem. And even now as a historian, I have a strong feeling that one can understand history much better with a knowledge of geography. So history is now taken first place in my academics.
Wonderful. Like you have spoken earlier, you told us that during your brief history that you were a teacher in North America. So how was that journey?
That journey was, I can still recall, Mrs. Street, the principal of the school, had a young son, David, my namesake, and he could have been quite a handful. And I was asked by Mrs. Street to go to the school to put her son David in place in their school, and that was my duty for the 2-3 months that I did. And I think I did a good job in getting young David to sit down and not to rampage through the classroom. But it was an enjoyable exercise.
Wonderful story, like Professor David to control another David in school.
We can be mischievous in our own time, you know.
Absolutely. So, sir, Professor, tell us more about your journey and tenure in the UPSC. How did this come about?
UPSC was another very special part of my life. If there has been in my adult life something other than teaching, it was in the UPSC. And I still remember the phone call that I got from Delhi while I was in Rajiv Gandhi University, where I was Vice Chancellor, informing me that I had an offer to join up the UPSC as a member. This was in the middle of 1970 or 2012. I'm getting my dates wrong, but it was in 2012, after having served 8 months in RGU. Having joined RGU from Nehu, I had to return to Nehu to take Lien from, I had gone on Lien to Rajiv Gandhi University, had to come back, take premature retirement from Nehu, and then I found my way to Delhi, where on 25th of June 2012, I joined up as member of the UPSC. I was a member for a good 4.5 years. And it was a wonderful experience working in this constitutional body. The work was very hard, in the sense long hours of work, of interviews and paperwork and looking through files and whatever. But it was a pleasure working in the UPSC those 4.5 years as a member, and then as chairman for 1 year, 1 month between 2017 and 18.
So, Professor, you spoke about being a Vice Chancellor in RGU, Rajiv Gandhi University. So can you tell us about this journey from St. Edmunds, Nehu, and then reaching RGU?
I still remember my application which I made for the Vice Chancellorship of RGU. It was a huge document of my biodata and my publications, as if publications are impressive enough for an interview for a Vice Chancellor position. But one of the things Nehu did for me was it prepared me for my work as an university administrator. While at Nehu, I was Dean of Student Welfare. At different times, Dean of Student Welfare, was College Development Director. I was Honorary Director, ICSSR. I was Registrar, I was Pro Vice Chancellor, I was Control of Examinations. So all these different functions that I held prepared me for this job of mine in Rajiv Gandhi University. And it was a wonderful experience. I'm not crying, it's just an eye problem.
And Professor, can you please tell me how did the transition happen between RGU and going to the UPSC? What was those last few months like?
The last few months in Rajiv Gandhi University were hectic. I found that the university had advertised positions, teaching positions, which had not been filled for 6 months. And therefore it was upon me to complete that task. And I did not move out of Rajiv Gandhi University for a good 6 weeks in the last 2 months of my stay in RGU. to complete the exercise of appointment of professors, readers and lecturers in the university and the non-teaching positions. And I must say it went smoothly, because I believe in my school motto of thorough, and I'm pretty thorough in the work that I did there. We had all the positions filled in, and once the interviews were over, got the Executive Council to approve the appointments of teachers, and then put my paper in for returning back to Nehru, and then followed it up by catching a plane and going to Delhi to join the UPSC.
Professor, how was your first month in the commission?
My first month in the commission was a period of study. We had to be initiated in the profession as members, and therefore we would go to other members' offices and rooms to see how they conducted interviews. We were assigned different departments, and with my experience as control of examinations, I gladly joined up as the member in charge of examinations in the UPSC. So it was a period of learning for the first 1 month, and it was a wonderful experience getting to know the functioning of the UPC. I can't go into the fuller details of it because it'll be a conflict of interest, but I must say that the system was very rigorous and thorough.
How did it shape you as an individual, Professor?
It shaped me to be punctual, it shaped me to take decisions honestly and to live up to expectations.
Those are very good qualities to imbibe. So how can you describe your post and experience, your posting and experience in UPSC?
Some would say that the conduct of interviews which go on month after month after month can be tedious. But for me, interviews, whether for the engineering service or the medical service or the civil service interviews, was an experience every day, a new experience, and every candidate that came in would be fresh and new. I remember in one of the medical interviews, a young girl, a young candidate coming in who actually hopped into the room. But I also remember one medical aspirant who came in wearing a hood rather than a coat. So I always advise candidates for the UPSC coming for the interviews to dress appropriately, to dress well and appropriately.
So, Professor, how was your experience and the challenges that you faced?
At the UPSC?
Yes.
There were times when things, particularly as chairman, there were times that decisions had to be taken, but very strong decisions and very decisions that needed a lot of consultation, and I'm a prayerful man, and I would say a prayer whenever I needed the prayer to give me strength. And there was one case which I can't go into. It was only after much prayer and meditation that I found a solution in getting the support of my other members and then taking a decision, and it has come to some fruition. But you could ask me questions, for instance, on the park in the UPSC. Have you been to the UPSC?
No, sir, I haven't.
Go to the UPSC. There are two things there that I left as a mark. One, my contribution in the museum. Being a historian, and I was partly responsible, not partly, in great measure, I was responsible for setting up a museum in the UPSC. And also a park. There's a wonderful park which the planning of which was done during the time I was chairman. And whenever I go to the UPSC, I go 3 times in the year to the UPSC. Even these days, we are invited to take interviews, and I go back 3 times in the year. I go for my early morning walk. If I don't walk in Malki, I walk in the garden of the UPSC.
So, Professor, what potential does the youth of Meghalaya have when it comes to aspiring to be in civil service?
Tremendous potential. They have the gift of language, they dress well, They present themselves well, and if they have studied well, they can compete with anybody in India. In fact, one of the happy things about the candidates who have got into the civil service recently, not recently, over the years, because we've not had too many coming in, is that they have always got into the general category, not in the reserve category, which shows that they have done exceedingly well and have been able to compete. So I urge upon our young candidates to take the example of IAS officers and others in the service who have done well in the civil service examination, and to then return back to the state and contribute to the good governance of our state.
So Professor, what, so to say, we have to speak about this topic. We have seen aspirants emerging from Manipur, so to say, a state that is war-torn. But what do you think is the stumbling block that is stopping our youth from Meghalaya to get through the civil services in the recent years?
I guess they're not applying themselves well enough. These days, coaching for IAS candidates is essential, but I ask the question, is it necessary? Can one do without it?
Yes.
And we've been able to see some candidates who have got into the civil service without going into the coaching. But coaching does help. I must say that the coaching does help, because in recent years the work has become so competitive, even in the tribal category. And therefore I will hold back my comments on the coaching, because if they believe it's the best thing that is for them, then go ahead. But once you've taken a decision to go for coaching, work hard and write your notes, get the job going. But a note of caution I would want to give: don't make too many attempts to attempt the civil service. It's held annually, and after 4 or 5 years, look for other avenues. Because if one is obsessed only with doing the civil service examination, one can get blocked in entering professions, because age will be increasing, and then one may miss out going into the banks, going into insurance, going into the other professions.
So if I would like to know, Professor, have you ever appeared for any competitive exams yourself?
I did one banking exam which I failed miserably.
How was the experience?
Not too good, because I did not know anything of banking. Didn't do economics in my college days, but I, like everybody else who was graduating in those days, thought of joining up the profession as a probationary officer. But I wanted to be a teacher, and I'm happy that I didn't get into the civil service or any other. And the question is often asked to me, and perhaps you could ask me, how is it that you did not do the civil service but then you became chairman of the Public Service Commission? I guess it's fate.
We'll leave it at that, it's fate. So, Professor, what further advice would you give to young IAS aspirants or those already in the service?
Work hard, be true to yourself, be ethically correct, and keep the standards high in good governance. Be kind, be thorough in your work, and don't yield to pressure, but set an example in the profession.
Where do you see Meghalaya in the next 10 years?
If you ask a historian this, it would not be correct, because we historians don't go into the future, we go into the past. But if I look at the past and see the progress that Meghalaya has made, then I could see a better Meghalaya. Because progress has been made on many scores. And I think we are, without making any political comment, we are moving towards better times. Difficult times too, but I think life is good and it would take us forward.
Sir, you spoke about living in Lomparing when you initially came back to Meghalaya. You lived in Lomparing and then you came to Malki. In which year?
1997, I believe.
So, how was the environment then and how can you compare to the environment today?
When we came to Malki, we found it rather a difficult area to live in from the quiet of Nehu, where we had lived for many years. But we have to adjust with the situation, and we adjusted very well. And now it's a happy place, and this is where I put my roots down in Malki.
From Lomparing to Malki and then to walking in the gardens of UPSC. So you've always had a very deep root sense with environment. So what do you think should improve or should be worked on for the next 10 years when it comes to this factor?
Better use of water, clean water, because this is going to be an issue in the years to come. The forest must remain, the quiet of the forest must remain. I do remember asking our candidate a question in an interview in the UPSC. Have you been into a forest? And he said yes. And I thought I would catch him giving him a difficult question. And I said, what is so special about the forest? And he said, silence. And it struck me. And exactly what we need these days is the silence in the forest and the chirping of birds and the animals and such. So and we are very fortunate here in Malki to live close to the forest.
That's very true, and the forest has really contributed to our livelihood, so
of
to
course,
say.
yes.
So, as a leader and leadership and management, that you have held positions in various institutes. So, how did you handle conflicts on difficult situations during your tenure?
By negotiation, by taking the stakeholders' confidence. I didn't arrive at too many issues other than some issues perhaps in RGU where life was quite difficult at certain stages, like any university administrator would face with students and non-teaching staff. But all in all, I think I've been very fortunate to have had rather smooth sailing as an administrator in RGU and even at Nehu. Yes, I do remember there was a time when Nehu went into a lot of problem, and I was control of examination, and I had told the students that they would miss out on their examinations if they wouldn't return to class. And so we devised a system in consultation with the students that they would go to class, have classes coming right up to Christmas or shortly before Christmas of that particular year, returning in early February to do the examination and starting their examinations again, starting their classes again in March. So it's with consultation, taking stakeholders into confidence that things go well.
All right, Professor, I would like to ask, how was your experience? Like we have spoken earlier that you have met the President, Pranab Mukherjee, Sir Pranab Mukherjee. So how was your experience meeting him?
In the UPSC, it was protocol that we would have to call on the President of India at least once during our tenure. And I missed out calling on him in the early part of my tenure. But when I was chairman of the UPSC, I did make an appointment with the Prime Minister, with the President of India, and I went alone that day, gave him a bouquet of flowers and a copy of my book, and you can see a picture there which I treasure. A most humble man, a very caring man, and a man who loves reading. And I was given 20 minutes initially, but he kept me back for 45 minutes talking on politics and freedom movement. And he said, "Professor, I want you to come back again." And after 2 weeks, the whole commission assembled and we went to the Rashtrapati Bhavan for tea in the yellow room. Everything is yellow there, from flowers to the curtains and the upholstery. And it was a wonderful experience. And I treasure the moment that I had with Sir Pranab Mukherjee.
What was the conversation about?
Books more than anything else. And I tried my smattering of Bangla, because I did Bengali as a second language in school. So I would have to say my dhanyabad, thanking him profusely for the time that he gave us. It was a very enriching experience.
So you've also met the Prime Minister of India, PM Narendra Modi. How was that experience?
Well, I do remember the urgency with which I had to go and meet the Prime Minister, Shri Modi. That was a matter which I can't go into in any detail, but he was kind enough to give me time to meet him in his office in Parliament, and I gave him the problem that I was facing in the UPSC, and he said, phone my office in 5 minutes time after you return and we'll find a solution. And we did get a solution within 2 weeks of my going to the UP to meet the Prime Minister. And that's another experience that I treasure immensely.
So what keeps you engaged, Professor, in your retirement?
Well, in my retirement, I continue to teach online and engaged in research. I still keep writing. It's not writing, I still compose, rather, that's a better word, because I've lost the art of writing. One of the woes of using the computer so much is we miss out on writing. I've never had a good flow, I've never made a good use of the pen once the computers came in. And I work 2-3 hours every day, even at this age, on the computer, checking up emails, I mentor students. I get any number of scholars coming to my house who wish to do research on various topics on the Northeast and on the Khasi history. And such is the activity that I do.
So, Professor, can you tell us about the strategies that should be applied for the aspiring civil servants?
Pardon me if I go on to a note, because I'm pretty thorough in writing my notes. Well, I urge aspirants to focus diligently on their work and study. Sometimes in this age we get distracted, and I urge them to diligently work, spend their time in the study. To peruse old question papers to familiarize themselves of the examinations. The UPSC has a stock of old question papers, and one can get it online these days, and it does help to see the pattern of examinations from the old question papers. Take informed choice of the selection of optional papers. There are 2 optional papers that the candidates need to do for the civil service examination. What we've been finding in the UPSC is that optional subjects such as public administration, political science, sociology, history, not so much history, but political science, sociology are the preferred subjects for the optional papers. And even graduates with engineering degrees, medical candidates, they don't take up their own subjects, but they do these subjects because they find it easier to study for these. But one of the things that I have always told young aspirants to the civil service is to read extensively and read books, not these notes. Because if one is only reading up through notes and not the books, and you scratch them deeper than should be scratched, they are glaringly oblivious of the details of history or the details in political science. They don't know the color of a book, they have not felt a book, and these are the impressions that we have.
So any books that you would like to suggest the aspirants read?
Well, it depends on the subject, because, for instance, I would always prescribe for myself, as also students of history who want to study ancient, medieval, modern history at one go, read A.L. Basham's The Wonder of India. David.R.Syiemlieh had a very interesting Shillong connection. He's buried in Shillong, a professor from some British universities. He became a historian of repute, and he married a Kasi professor, and he spent his last days in Calcutta, and after his demise he's buried in the Anglican graveyard close to the General's Point. So he has a wonderful book. So it depends on subject to subject. Modern India would have a separate set of books. Regrettably, there's not enough of the Northeast incorporated into the civil service examination. But I would prescribe Hill Politics in Northeast India by S.K. Chobe for anybody who wants to study on Northeast India. S.K. Chobe. S.K. Chobe was my professor in St. Edmund's College way back in 1971-72. Thereafter he moved to Delhi University, and he's written a marvelous text, Hill Politics in Northeast India.
So, Professor, you have had a very illustrious life.
Thank you.
Yes. And who inspired you to be an academician or a teacher?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have had mentors. In St. Edmund's College, I was very fortunate to have K.K. Bhattacharjee, who taught me history. He would loan me his books. He would be very endearing to me, and even spared his notes and books for me. And I learnt a lot from KKB. At the university, there was Professor Imdad Hussain, who became my supervisor and guide in my PhD. And Imdad Hussain, another teacher. These were wonderful teachers who not only taught but became mentors and friends. And I treasure the friendship. And I'm still in touch with Professor Bhattacharjee and Imdad Hussain.
So, Professor, when I got the news that I was going to interview you, I was very excited. And we had a conversation with some of our friends, and they said that you were the Indiana Jones of...
Who's he?
One of our friends said that you were the Indiana Jones or the Tomb Raider. So would you describe yourself as the Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider?
Well, I've done some bit of discovery of graves. My first discovery leading to more information on somebody's death was on Tirot Singh, the aim of Nong Clau. This was in 2008, where I was able to discover his date of death in a library in London, India Office Library and Archives in London. And that story is old now, and I think our society knows the details of what I've written. But what I'm worried about is I've researched that to show that Tirot Singh did not die in jail. But every year on the anniversary of the date that I brought back from London, 17 July, the meetings continue to make reference to Tirot Singh died in jail. The British respected him as a native ruler, gave him a bungalow, gave him servants, gave him an allowance, and yet we say the poor man died in jail. Bupli yapaba patak. He did not die in a patak. He died as a respectable chieftain. And this is something that I wish we revise our thinking on Tirot Singh. Another grave, and this was way back in 2008. In 2006, earlier than this, I discovered the grave of Thomas Jones, the first Welsh missionary to the Khasis. This grave of his is in Karaya Road, off Circular Road in Calcutta. And I'm extremely happy that the Presbyterian Church has done up the grave and put a marble cover to the grave. And it reads, Thomas Jones, father of Khasi alphabet. And whenever I go to Calcutta, I go to Karaya Road with a bunch of flowers and I put it on his grave. And I urge Khasis, whenever they go to Calcutta, to do the same and to pay respect to this forlorn Welshman. And the third grave is the grave of Otto Hopfenmoller, the first German missionary who came to the Khasi Hills. He died in 1890, and I chanced upon his grave in the Anglican graveyard. What was very interesting in those days was that the Catholics who had no cemetery needed to be buried should they have died in our hills. And there was an enclave of the Anglican graveyard specially earmarked for the Catholics, and this was very generous of the Anglican Church, giving space to the Catholics to bury. You know, you have these distinctions between Catholics and Anglican and Presbyterian, but here was a truly wonderful gesture of giving Otto Hopfenmoller space to be buried in an Anglican graveyard. But I could, there is a small grave on the Moplang Road named after Camilla. I wonder if the audience who will be listening to this program would have walked down the David Scott track at Moplang. You might lose out on discovering the grave of Camilla, soft silken primrose fading timelessly, Camilla, 1873. No, wait, no, let me get my dates right. 1843. No, I'm not getting my date right, but it is Camilla, a young European child who was buried on that grave. It's a singular grave, and it's maintained fairly well. And I've written a piece on it somewhere. I'll have to search for and get the date correct.
So, Professor, we have seen on the news all around, going around, that you have been nominated for the Padma Shri. So has the date for the investiture been announced?
No, the date has not been announced, and I'm waiting a call from the ministry. I've got my suit ready, I've got my rindia ready, and I'm going to smile more on the day that I go to get the award from President of India. It'll be a proud day for me and my family, but I'm dedicated this to my school, to my college, and to my university, and might I also say to the people of Meghalaya.
Thank you so much, sir.
Kublai.
It was wonderful talking to you, and me and my team, the whole team of Snow TV, would like to congratulate you on being nominated and winning the Padma Shri. Congratulations.
Kublai.
All the best for your future and whatever plans you have ahead. And thank you for giving us time to talk here today. It was wonderful, and you have a wonderful garden. I can't miss that. That garden's wonderful. Thank you so much. It
You
was
have to thank
wonderful
Kong
being here.
B, who's the gardener, and my dear wife who loves to potter around the garden.
Anything else you would like to say to our viewers?
Nothing more to say other than it's been a pleasure for this group to come to my house today and take the recording. I hope I was able to give a message across of my life and my work. We've gone a little slow on my academics because I've had a number of other interviews which have portrayed my academics, but I continue to do my academics to the extent possible, and it's been a pleasure having you all.
We would like to thank all the viewers of Snow TV, the team, everyone, Sir David or Professor David.R.Syiemlieh, and thank you once again until we meet again.